Hi all. What an exciting day it's been right across Russia. It appears Wagner rebelled, but did he
No,
really?
did he really?
It's kind of hard to tell because it appears that a military force that can't drive into Ukrainian territory and stay there has managed to do a road trip of about 750 kilometers at a rock bottom minimum in about 10 hours. That's pretty impressive for any military, and even more interesting, it's just been announced in Sky News, I've got it on in the other room, that the Wagner leader, Prevushkin, or whatever his name is, actually has been given a full pardon and has been invited to go to Putin's other very good friend to go spend time with Lukashenko in Belarus. Apparently, Wagner troops are being given leave to join the Russian army. And when we saw pictures of him allegedly having a stand-up knockdown fight with the deputy defense minister and the front commander in Rostov earlier in the day, to me it looked kind of like three buddies having a chat. So it gets more and more interesting, does it not? And whether or not any of this actually is real is another question altogether, because I know from reading Court of the Red Tsar by Sebag Montefiore, and I know that Geoff has read that book. It is one of the classic sources to examine what was happening in the Soviet Union during Stalin's regime. We know that when the Nazis invaded Russia, allegedly, Stalin went into a fugue state. He didn't. He sat and worked behind the scenes through various of his security apparatus type people to wait for the Politburo to come and hand him ultimate power instead of it simply being first amongst equals, which is what it had been during the Great Purge, just before the war. A purge which, by the way, continued throughout the war. And you can find that out by taking a look at various different sources if you really want to. So one has to wonder, and certainly I'm smelling lots of fish here, as a student of Russian politics during certain periods of time, the fish I'm smelling is, was this a very clever move by Putin to reinforce his personal power? And will there now be, how shall I put it, constitutional changes to secure the internal security of Russia? In other words, giving Putin ultimate power, which currently, in theory, he doesn't have. We know in practice he exercises it, but that's different to having the legal right to do things. Anyway, over to Geoff. Welcome to the vlog, Geoff. I'm sure you've had a really interesting day with this. What's your take on this fiasco?
Well, the biggest thing that I was thinking about was what, for me, it was all about Prigozhin. It's very, if before you mentioned the possibility that it's effectively a false flag operation, my take was that Prigozhin was getting really worried about, he didn't want to be thrown out a window. Because Wagner have done some useful things, but they haven't exactly been the perfect cracked assault troops that he was playing them up to be. And I thought that he was so utterly despairing of his position, hearing about a lot of bankers and other people being thrown out of windows, that he had no choice but to march on Putin. And the fact, and I didn't think it'd have any success. I said, right, give it 1 month and he's gone. Because Russia does, well, most authoritarian regimes do occasionally have history of underlings that crack, that are terrified, that push back against the regime and the military apparatus around it doesn't support them, their rebellion falls, bye bye, and then they are thrown out a window accidentally. But in hindsight, what you're saying about it being so half-hearted, it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, the other thing is the thing here that smells. It appears that they drove out of their military zone, allegedly without permission, in an area which is controlled by Southwestern Front, which has fairly significant numbers of Russian troops in it. They allegedly took Rostov without any fighting. Rostov being the Army Group HQ, if you like, the front HQ for Southwestern Front. The bit that's actually running the fighting that's going on apparently right now with the alleged Ukrainian offensive, of course, with his right flank protected by a conveniently flooded area of former Russian territory. You know, guys, get a map that's got terrain on it, go to Google, see what side of that river's higher. You know, the Russians wouldn't flood themselves, I don't think. I'm really dubious about that whole thing. And when you look at who owned what at the beginning of the month, the Russians weren't really that close to the dam that they blew up. A dam which, by the way, they blew up in 1941 and the Nazi Germans blew up in 1943. So quite a few people have done this before. It's a well-known trick to blow that up because it does kind of secure your flank. And it also screws up your logistics, by the way, just so you know. It tends to take all the bridges out south of it. That means you've got to go north of Cherkasy or up to Cherkasy to get across the Dnieper. Certainly back in the day, I know there are a few more bridges now, but it's still a limited crossing capacity. And if you take away one major route and 2 or 3 bridges and whatnot south of it, you've obviously put a crimp in someone's logistics. The other thing is that dam apparently was a large part of Crimea's water supply. That stuff I've seen on Facebook. I've never managed to prove it yet. If I do manage to prove it, we'll bring that up in another vlog. So I don't know. It doesn't make sense for the Russians to blow up a dam which supplies Crimea. And one of the complaints that Russia has is no water in Crimea. Let you draw your own conclusions of that one. But yeah, how can you then, you know, having driven down, taken Southwestern Front's HQ without any problem, then drive almost 1,000 kilometers? The spearhead was Stupino, which is about 100 clicks from Moscow. We're not talking about the 200 they're talking about in the press. All the situation maps and statements from the local officials suggest that Wagner were there 4 to 6 hours ago. How does that happen? I think we'd find it difficult in Britain to drive that far in that period of time, in peacetime, if only because of the volume of traffic and bloody roadworks. I mean, this whole thing absolutely stinks. And we're not talking about some guy getting a nice, comfortable, I don't know, Volkswagen Polo or a Jag or a BMW or a Mercedes or something, or a big American Chevy, and getting the pedal to the metal and sitting 100 mile an hour or 80 mile an hour up a very good road. You know, these are big, cumbersome military vehicles. Many of them have got speed limiting on them for very good reason. Convoy speeds are 30 to 50 clicks an hour. We're not talking about something which is going like a bat out of hell up a highway. So no one's done that time distance thing. I spent a lot of time looking at maps this afternoon trying to work out how long it would take. I did a Google directions thing just so you all know. Apparently it would take about 11 hours for me driving. And Google, I use it sometimes on my phone for directions when it's somewhere the sat-nav in my car doesn't understand properly. So it does know how long it takes me to get from A to B. Rostov to Moscow is about 11-hour drive in ideal conditions.
Yeah.
Not of course that I'm saying that there's anything wrong with the press is reporting here. And, you know, this was meant to be a rant. This is going to be a bloody rant. Sorry, Geoff, continue. I interrupted you rudely. I'm sorry about that.
Well, I don't really have anything else to say because the big thing was, I began to think you were right the moment it said that Prigozhin was going to Belarus, exile. That was the thing that. So Putin has been merciful. He's ruthlessly crushed it. Blah blah blah, and he's sent this guy away. There we go. Job done. I want to know what Prigozhin is going to be doing from now on. Is he going to be cooling his heels in a Belarusian dasha with bunga bunga girls or something? or is he going to be doing stuff in the, I don't know, doing stuff behind the scenes for Putin and going back to being a chef? You know,
I like the idea of the Bunga Bunga girls myself. I think it'd be quite good fun. But if you take a little look at various situation maps, yeah, I mean, he's moving essentially 2 combat experienced brigade groups up there, isn't he? You know, which, from what I can make out, actually know how to drive down a road pretty damn quick. If I was the Kiev government, I might be a little bit concerned about that development. Given previous experience with some half-decent Russian troops almost taking Kiev, does that not maybe create an opportunity to once again expand the war into the northern area?
Oh, possibly. It depends on whether the Russians have sorted out their offensive capability. I completely understand that, you know, you've seen all the deficiencies in the Ukrainians, and we're seeing that with their wide front and not really getting anywhere. But I just don't see the Russians having improved their capability that much for an offensive. Defensively, that's a whole different kettle of fish. You know, we can see where they've got lots of artillery, and they seem to be doing a reasonable job at slowing or degrading the Ukrainian offensive. I just don't think that they have the ability to do a northern offensive yet.
According to, and I'm going to share this screen, so you're going to get something weird with Geoff in a corner and me possibly not even on screen, which is probably a good thing for y'all. This is from Deep State Map Live. You can see it up here, right there, yeah? Take a look at it. The green area is allegedly bits which they retook. So the initial offensive you can see down here and up here from Gomel and Mazyar, down through Chernobyl and so on to Irpin, just outside of Kiev, that was not, as people claimed, a single road. Nor is all this stuff up here around Konotop and Chernigov and Sumy and so on. If you take a look at it, it's actually a fairly well designed double envelopment to try and get to Kiev, which, by the way, more or less replicates the first, second, and third Ukrainian front's offensive in World War II. This area around Kharkov, I'm actually quite surprised that they did it that way. The obvious thrust is this one here, skirting Kharkov and going via Poltava down to Kremenchuk and Cherkasy. If you do that, you take the bridges. The dam that was blown is this one somewhere about down here. It doesn't flood this side. This is not a terrain map. Let's see if we can see something on this. I'm going to put this into the terrain mode and see if we can zoom in. But if you take a look, you can see here, the south side of the river is essentially flat. There is absolutely nothing there. And that is what the Russians call the left bank. That's the side that Russia had. The Ukrainian side is somewhat higher. And you can see here you've got some escarpment and so on. It's about 100-meter lift. That's the 300-foot lift. And that, by the way, runs all the way up. And it's actually the way the tectonic plate sits. And every single major river, the western bank is always higher than the eastern bank inside Russia. This is one of the reasons why during World War II, the Germans were able to hold a lot of these river lines and reasonably, I won't say easily, but reasonably easily inflict quite heavy casualties. So when we start to talk about, yeah, they flooded this. This is the area down here that get flooded. It's all Russian held. Why would the Russians do that? It really doesn't make sense. So the other cool thing about this is it has, because we're using Google, you know, we can put the traffic on. So let's go and have a look and get rid of the, see if it will give me some traffic around Rostov. There we go. So we can see some roadblocks. This is the other thing that I found a bit interesting. That's a roadblock there. It only seems to appear, you know, relate to very specific bits of road. So if I really wanted to go this way, I just come up this road here. Yeah, jump on the motorway again. Hey guys, I've just bypassed your roadblock. Now, if you're driving big, heavy military vehicles, this half-built superhighway here is just as effective. So I'm not quite sure. Now, these bridges across the Don River, some of them are fairly new, some of them are fairly old. They're all left open, and yet I'm pretty sure I did find something in the south side. There we go. There's a wee bit here, right, over towards the east side of Rostov. And yet, if we come up through Pataysk, the road's open, guys. So, yeah, I mean, the response, if this was a rebellion, is appalling. It doesn't seem to have achieved much. If we continue up the M4 motorway, which apparently is how, and we are going quite a long way. Just so you know, about an inch is roughly 5 clicks. So we're going quite far up here. We're not seeing an awful lot of anything other than, hey, you can drive up that road just fine, guys. Not a problem. Right? Now, we are about to start, sometime sooner or later, getting close to Voronezh. I was speaking to someone in Voronezh earlier on today, just out of curiosity to find out what they were saying. They're pretty much a mouthpiece for the Russian government's normalcy program, to be honest. They were saying, oh yeah, it was just an oil refinery had a problem. I can't find an oil refinery, but can find a couple of air bases and railway goods yards and so on, oil storage facilities. And the film we've seen in the West certainly looks like a May 24 gunship shot something up. May or may not be true, that. But if you take a look, hey, you can't go along that road there into the middle of Voronezh. No idea why. You can drive around this side here. Yeah, you can get across that bridge if you really want to. Right, so they shut the main road here, and the main road, the M4, you know, the KFC was kept open, obviously. You know, you can now drive pretty much all the way up, except for a minor roadblock here at this interchange. I mean, seriously, guys. And this is meant to stop a mechanised brigade. How? I'm being really, really dubious about this. There's a couple of pathetic little roadblocks around the edge of Moscow, a couple of roads here that are blocked. So remember I said Stupino, right? So Kolomnia is here, Stupino is here. Stupino, by the way, used to be Stavka. And guess what? Moscow's right there. You know, that is about 100 clicks. It's not that far. And if you take a look, if you were really serious about it, you drive round to Abinsk, which is not going to take you that long given the speed of advance these guys seem to have attained, and about an hour and a half later, you're in the middle of Moscow.
You could possibly say that the roadblocks aren't actually designed to stop the military, but they are designed to stop civilian traffic. So that's how they managed to get up so quickly. The roadblocks, in effect,
which would be very convenient which would be really convenient, would it not, if you'd been told by Putin via this guy who runs the place that we're going to do a proper power grab, so we need the obvious threat.
Exactly.
It's a single road, guys. Come on. Right, now we know they did that before. So let's take a look at Google. This is the live AU map that we usually do. You'll notice there's a little bit of fighting here, a little bit of fighting down here. I know, again, from talking to someone who's in Belgorod earlier today, they arrived back in the UK this afternoon, very tired, but there's been around 70 artillery strikes in the Belgorod region, mostly in Belgorod itself. So, you know what, guys? Read into what what I'm saying to you, what you will, please. Right, I'm not hugely bothered if you don't like it, because I have come to the conclusion that I think we're absolutely getting told a bunch of porky pies. Right, so yeah, you know, Milarovo, I've lost a Truxton fire. I mean, come on. I'm just loving this whole thing. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I know that maybe I'm not a military type of person, but I've done an awful lot of reading into this kind of stuff down the years. And this smells of a political deal done within Russia to me.
you could possibly make the argument that because Prigozhin was sweating a bit at failing, what if he proposes to his boss? I've had enough. I want somewhere comfortable. I can't do this anymore, but let me give you one last favor in return. And Putin goes, "Oh, what favor is that?" "Well, boss, how about I do something that secures your power a little more?"
Yeah,
And then Putin goes, "Oh,
that wouldn't
okay."
surprise me. Yeah, that it makes sense. I like that analysis actually, and it's this isn't conspiracy theory stuff, guys. This is from reading about how this works, understanding a bit about the way Hitler took ultimate power in Germany, understanding a bit about how Lenin and Trotsky and Stalin took it initially, and then how Stalin got rid of the old guard, if you like, and then executed assorted people who he perceived as a threat or who defended him and all that kind of stuff. This is based upon years of digging into this kind of horrifying nonsense that we find out that all too often the dictators are driven by fear. They're driven by terror, as if you like, not repressive terror. They are the repressor, if you like. They're repressing their own people. But they're driven by fear of a loss of power because they know the cost. Because they're imposing that on their competitors. So, I've had a bit of a rant here about this. Geoff, would you like to have a little rant while we're on the topic? You know.
Well, the thing is, John, the rant has been taken out of me over this entire day because I was looking at it going, crikey, rebellion, blimey. Then, oh, they've stopped. And then, oh, it might never exist in the first place. I am completely spent energy-wise looking at this. It just feels it's a bizarre anticlimax.
Yeah, it seems very pat. The more I'm hearing, the less convinced I am about its validity as a genuine rebellion. Reading body language, I used to sell double glazing in kitchens and fridges and God knows what. You know, I've been in sales a lot, and I'm trained to read body language. And guys are sat, you know, casually just having a chat, and someone's taking notes on their mobile phone, and another guy's taking a call from his wife. You know, that ain't a hostile meeting. You know what I'm saying? That's just people who know each other, relatively comfortable.
Taking a call from your wife isn't a hostile meeting. Well, I mean, John, come on.
Never having been married, I will leave that topic there. Geoff and I have been working a bit in Last Mile Venus. So you know, Geoff, I've done some basic silhouettes and so on, and there we go. Got the book. I've read a whole bunch of stuff. We're well on the way now to OB creation. Jeff's already started it. We had a chat on the phone, as I think I've mentioned. So tonight, essentially, I'm just going to say it's working. I've been on the phone to Corey for about 4 or 5 hours yesterday. So he has diverted away from the US 8th and 9th and 12th and 15th Air Forces with a slight atmosphere of disbelief. I'd asked him to do it, and then extensive relief, because it is quite a big job, that one. And he's doing some OLIs. He's going to come up with some combat unit values. And he and I also had a little bit of a chat about how we're going to handle standoff weapons. You know, it's really going to be, you know, you fire it, you've got a percentage chance of a hit. And given the way most modern warships are built, pretty much it's a one-hit kill. So everything will be a critical hit, if you like. So you have to get pretty lucky. There's going to be some digging that we need to do about certain types of rating for aircraft, but that's not that big a deal. I'm pretty sure we can come up with something that will work effectively. So, Geoff, have you found anything exciting with Last Mile Venus yet?
Well, not really anything that I don't already know. I mean, I'll have another look through, but the thing is, what people, if there's one thing that annoys me about the Falklands War that is common knowledge, it's this thing that you get with World War One and World War Two, where aircraft made a really big impression, and everyone suddenly realized how vulnerable warships were to aircraft, and this was a lesson that no one knew. And I don't even have time or the energy to get annoyed at it. Just when you have British frigates and destroyers blowing up multiple Skyhawks or whatever with missiles, yes, sometimes that Skyhawk will get lucky. Yes, we have Exocet. But let's just make this absolutely clear. From World War One all the way up to now, the balance of power between an aircraft and a warship with defensive AA armament, doesn't matter the type of armament, doesn't matter. From World War One up to now, the balance is more even than people realize. It's not even, if you look at the destruction of aircraft over the period of Falklands War, more are destroyed by Sea Harriers than by warships. And yes, if an aircraft plays its cards properly, it can take out, I don't know, HMS Sheffield if she's not looking properly. Though there are a lot of mistakes with Glasgow reporting it and Sheffield not responding to those warnings. But the fact is, a warship, it is perfectly possible to adequately defend a very large hunk of metal against a very small hunk of metal.
What I would say is, when I've looked at this for World War II, there are clear differences in capability, Navy to Navy. Top of the pile with the US Navy, mainly because they learned from us, Brits, fairly quickly. And they were very fortunate that their 5-inch mount was a work of art as a naval gun, to be honest. A very good elevation, very high rate of power, fire, semi-automatic loading, that kind of stuff. Right, really good mount with a really modern fire control director. Number 2 in the list is the Royal Navy, who learned the hard way at the beginning of the war. And as the war continued, things got better and better. And by 1942, it was pretty much a one-way trip if you were in a twin-engine bomber trying to attack a British task force. Somewhat different if you're flying a Stuka. You did have a slightly higher chance of success, maybe 75% chance of success, which means getting home alive. But the reality of it is, after that, you've got Germany, who are actually pretty good, especially their light flak was pretty damn dangerous towards the end of the war. Their medium heavy stuff wasn't quite as good, but that really was down to director issues and a lack of trust in their radar. And then you've got Japan, and the Japanese have plenty of particularly 25mm AA guns, but it's a rubbish gun. It vibrates, its muzzle velocity isn't high enough, so its reach isn't particularly good. Because the shell design isn't wonderful, even if it hits stuff, it's probably about as good as a 20mm cannon, but it's not a good one. And I don't know how to describe it any better than saying it's not that great. So they don't have the Bofors 40 or the 2-pounder pom-pom. They don't actually have an Oerlikon equivalent, really, because that's actually a pretty damn good weapon in its own right. But the key thing there is the defensive, therefore, and the Japanese, so you're all aware, have an outstanding 3.9-inch high-angle mount, but they don't have many of them. There's very few ships that actually get them. The Akizuki-class destroyers have them, and they are exceptional AA vessels. Unfortunately, they don't build that many of them, and they're never deployed in a group. There's always one here or one there, just because of that slow rate of commissioning. Their 5-inch is a perfectly good gun for high angle stuff, but their director control systems and their naval doctrine, plus a fault in the mount design and the fact that their directors are designed in the mid to late 20s, not the mid to late 30s, means that they can't react to very high-speed aircraft particularly well, which of course causes them a big problem, yada, yada, yada. Now, it then gets to the point where off Samar, the US Navy lose about 35 planes and basically blow away half the fleet. So the exchange rate ship for plane there is about 5 planes to 1 ship, as I recall. That's kind of a slaughter. And the Americans aren't losing that many aircrew because they get submarines out fishing people out the drink and all that kind of stuff. But in general, A can protect a task group. you know, convoys did get to Malta. Convoys did get to Murmansk. Hell, convoys got to Singapore with fairly minimal losses, with the Japanese Air Force not that far away from it in 1942. And American convoys did get to Guadalcanal. Some Japanese convoys, not as many as they wanted, did get to Guadalcanal despite American airstrikes. So yeah, I take your point, but I'm just throwing out a few devil's advocacy things here that my reading, being quite detailed about the US Navy. Yeah, so you know, guys, we have done more Fletcher class destroyers. We're going to do some more tomorrow, I think. Is getting there. So you know, that's kind of my take on it. But I also get the impression that the task group, for all it was taking a bit of a pasting, had already gained at least air parity over the Falklands, because the combination of RAF raids in Stanley and the imaginary threat of Vulcan bombers going and nuking Buenos Aires or attacking air bases in Argentina, plus the Harriers themselves, meant that the Argentine air defense or interceptor force, which was being used as an escort force, was pushed right back into Argentine airspace. And then Britain gained sea control by one simple act. We blew the Belgrano's bow and stern off with 3 Mark 8 torpedoes. You know, Tata Argentine Navy, go home, don't come back.
Yeah, I mean, once you get rid of the carrier, you get rid of the potential for short-range airstrikes, which means that either you have a little coming from the Falklands, or quite a lot taking a long time to get to come from the mainland. And there you go.
Yeah.
From that point on, we have a nice little Harrier force, which is just good enough and just different enough. I mean, the Argentines are a bit, you know, taken aback by the fact these annoying little gnat things are, you know, really maneuverable and they can do a lot of damage. And it gets to the point where you can have Royal Naval Air Service and RAF pilots going in for gun kills against Mirages, Skyhawks, and what have you.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm not quite sure if we properly gain air parity in the classical sense, but it's so near as damn it. You know, it might as well not be anything else.
With parity, I don't think we had full superiority, and we certainly didn't have supremacy.
No.
So I know a lot of the guys who are going to buy Last Mile Venus are into what ifs. So I'm going to deal with the nice, simple ones. You know, we know that the US decided that it would provide our friends in the Royal Navy with an Iwo Jima class LPH. That would have been LPH-2 Iwo Jima herself, with some American crew operating essentially as mercenaries. But with a long-standing naval tradition of privateering, one does wonder, had American political decision-making been a little bit different, and if they had decided that they couldn't possibly have their primary ally, as they might have seen it in Europe, humiliated by what could well have been seen as a second-rate South American power, we then decided to take a look at some more interesting what-ifs. So one of them is to essentially suggest to Britain that the US Navy are going to get involved, and the ready battle group for Second Fleet consists of Nimitz and Forrestal and their respective escorts. And we believe there might well have been an Iowa-class battleship in commission, because during Reagan's build-up to the 600-ship Navy, this. So, you know, but Geoff's got a really cool one, which I really quite like, which I'll let you tell him about your thoughts about whether or not Vanguard should have been mothballed and then brought Corey loves this, by the way. He wants that in the game. He's going. There's only one counter. We can do that.
The one thing I really want to do with Vanguard, I don't just want Vanguard as she was just before she was mothballed or what have you. I want to see how would we have modernized Vanguard. What missiles would Vanguard have had? You know,
she'd probably had CCAT, which is basically valueless. She would not have gotten over the horizon stuff, I don't think, because a 15-inch gun can hit shit 30 kilometers away.
Yeah.
No, I don't think they'd have bothered too much. Hey, dude, you fire a Styx missile at the New Jersey or the Missouri in the Arabian Gulf and during Desert Storm. And the captain of the ship said, "Oh yeah, if they hit us, we'll just brush a debris over the side, reinstate the railing, and paint the ship again." Just after their 16-inch guns have completely obliterated them. So don't worry about it, dude. We're fine here. Vanguard would have been treated, I think, pretty much like that. I don't think they would have spent too much money. I know the US put a helicopter landing pad in the fantail, put a couple of CIWS on it, and I believe some Tomahawk missiles and possibly Harpoon. But Britain didn't have a lot of money. If we were keeping the ship, we wouldn't have been spending money on her, I don't think.
No. Bit of a pity, but hey-ho.
Probably would be really cool. Would be the 3 or 4 CVA-1 class carriers that should have been built.
Indeed. With full fat Buccaneer complement.
Yeah, I was thinking probably 18 or 24 F4s and at least 12 or 16 Buccaneers. And given that it was a proper carrier, none of your through-deck cruiser bullshit with a ski jump on it, we might well have gone to the American Navy and purchased something called Hawkeye, which would have given it proper airborne early warning. The only thing is, a Harrier, unlike an F4, is actually a high availability aircraft. Its serviceability rate is fantastic. It's about 93%, whereas the Royal Navy and the US Navy's Phantoms, I believe, are sat around 50%. That said, wartime always provides financial impetus to provide the stores and the spare parts that you need. So do you fancy guys trying to invade the Falklands with an American carrier battle group or two? I think it'd be really cool. I also think we could maybe provide the second carrier, the 29th or whatever it is, that the RGs had. It's actually HMS Warrior. So they could have had Warrior and Venerable. And we're going to do a 1988 version because I know that almost came to blows. And that should be quite intriguing. Both sides have a lot more capability. It should be a fairly easy win for the British, that one. There should be a lot less threat because they do have Phantoms down at Port Stanley. I understand that at least 4, possibly 6 GR3s were flown down just before a potential balloon would have gone up. And they were the ones which were modified to operate as part of the NATO anti-shipping strike force up into the Norwegian Sea. So they'd Sea Eagle. And Sea Eagle is a Harpoon equivalent. It's a very good anti-shipping missile, as I understand it. So, those are some of the things I've got. Geoff, what else have you got that we can put into this that's going to be fun in games?
Oh, have the Russians give the Argentines or operate on behalf of Argentina a couple of kilos or, I don't know, a couple of alphas or something. Let's have some proper submarine combat. None of this, I don't know what they were, Santa Fe rubbish.
Yeah, the Bilal class Guppy 1 conversion, yeah. We could probably look at that. The big deal we've actually got is just how awkward Tigerfish is to operate. The Royal Navy didn't like it. That's why Conqueror fired our World War II vintage Mark 8s at USS Phoenix, also known as the Belgrano, and blew her out of the water. The other thing we can do is leave Boise in the Argentine Navy. I can't remember her name, but I know that she was part of the Argentine Navy and was decommissioned just a few years before, probably to provide spare parts to the Belgrano. But you never know. They might have been able to find a deal with the Americans to get some spares for it and keep it going, So, yeah, there's some what-if stuff we can do there. I think the other big what-if is going to be... this is one which... If we do the American what if, and I know we're going to, there is a question, and that is how many B-52Hs have been modified to fire Tomahawk land attack missiles? Because you sure as hell don't need a carrier battle group if you've got 90 B-52s with TLAM on it. There ain't no Argentine Air Force or Navy left. It's just a smoking hole, and in a conventional smoking hole at that, in the ground somewhere, wherever it is. And I can already hear the Argentine player saying to his buddy who's playing the Argentine Air Force, well, what have you got left? Nothing. What happened? We don't know. Some guy rolled a die and we just died. I don't get it, because that would have been launched from somewhere just south of Ascension and would have taken the whole lot out. But it does kind of beg the question: where do you draw the line at a what if? Because that isn't an unreasonable what if, given what the Americans did to Saddam Hussein's command control system in one day, essentially using those planes 10 years later.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly showcases the firepower a player would have if we ever did a full-on World War III game.
Yeah.
It would be very interesting to watch what happens to the Soviet command and control system east of Fulda Gap when Curtis LeMay's birthday present gets launched. And yeah, I don't know. Really, you just draw the line when you feel like it, I suppose. I mean, let's give people lots of stuff to have fun with at Argentina's expense. I mean, there was the French battle group as well. We were discussing that, weren't we? What if we strong arm the French into helping us?
I mean,
what if the French send a...
Just so you know, guys, I just noticed, I was taking a quick look at the B-52 and trying to work out when maybe it got TLAM, but apparently Rolls-Royce engines are going on them to replace Pratt & Whitney engines. Part of the service life extension, the oldest combat aircraft still flying in regular day-to-day sort of bomb hauling capacities, getting new engines, going to keep on going to 2050. Means they're 100-year-old when they get retired, boys and girls. That's impressive.
It's an aerial battleship, isn't it?
Yeah,
an
absolutely.
Aerial battleships always last longer than anything else.
Absolutely, and to be fair, they were kind of put together for a very different mission, and I suspect that they were stressed to cope with it. Nuclear blast being what it is, and as an engineer, I can tell you overpressure is a horrible thing to deal with. So if they were working with that and trying to get overpressure protection, there's a good chance that the fatigue life of the aircraft is still pretty good. Anyway, so not totally irrelevant. But yeah, I think chucking some French stuff in would be quite interesting, because, they're French. You never know. If they roll the die the wrong way, they might accidentally shoot something British, And trying to get some revenge for the last British war against France in 1940 and 41 and 42 and 43. As Britain sort of quietly invaded, French Syria and Lebanon and Madagascar and, Chad and, assorted places around Africa. And pirated 1.5 million tons of French merchant shipping. And because of that total failure, the Commander Force H actually get cashiered. Just so you know, Churchill wasn't impressed. He expected 2.5 million tons of shipping, so he fired him for not being nasty enough to the French, which essentially is what happened. It's really quite sad reading when you go into that kind of stuff. But yeah, so Last Malvinas looks
British. We're British, putting
now, you're not allowed to say anything about garlic eating or surrender monkeys. I just did, didn't I? That just came out, yeah. Right. So I mean, all jesting aside, guys, we've got a lot of good ideas for it. It's not a huge game. If we can get it put together real quick, we'll do some brief play testing, because we know the bulk of the system works. And then we're just going to put it to press. 4 counter sheets, we can do that through the printers, no problem at all. And we'll get back to you on it in a couple of weeks' time once we've done a bit more work. In the meantime, I will be working again in Balkan Fury 2 and finalising whatever I need to do in terms of shouting at the printers for mucking up the quotes. We did find out why they essentially doubled the price of one of the quotes pretty much overnight. Turns out they used the wrong cardboard in the quotation. Sounds like an excuse I've heard before. somewhere, and it's called Wasn't Me Gov. I'm waiting on the amended price, but shouldn't affect any progress that we've got for printing those 2 games. We're about to wind this up, I think, for tonight. I'm going to put a wee appeal out. info@tkc-games.com if you get Balkan Fury 2 or Madagascar in order, mostly Balkan Fury 2. Please email that. I want your address. If you've already emailed me, don't worry about it. We've got it. If you like what we've been talking about, click like down below. If you don't, hit dislike. Andrew will have put some links down in there for our website where you can buy our games. And we'll come back to World War I in about 2 weeks' time, because Geoff and I have been doing quite a lot of chatting about that, but we'll do a special video for that for you guys. And thank you all for watching. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend, brilliant week, whatever it is when we finally get this video out. It should be out pretty soon, because I'm going to light fire under Andrew. So take care, guys. See you next time. Bye-bye.